the Shelf. I'm your host, Yvonne Wolf. Today, our special guest is returning author Tom Sundell with his newest book, A Viennese Waltz. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you.
Well, since our last interview, what have you been doing? I know you have many books out there.
Right. Well, I write every day, so it accumulates. And every Wednesday I put up something fresh on my website, usually a short piece. But in terms of novels, there's been several since The Bloodline of Kings was the interview.
Right. And this is historic.
Yes, this is set in 1912 in Vienna. The protagonist is Zoltan Vajda, who is, it actually opens on January 4, his birthday, the 30th. And he is a waiter, living a very quiet life, 5 years in Vienna, but he has a troubled past, and that will figure prominently. At the Cafe Adriatic, where he works as a waiter, there's a number of regulars, his favorite being Leopold von Kunstner, who is a journalist, a writer. And within the family that owns the cafe is Maria Olbrich, who at 16 is kind of a clumsy girl just coming out of being a child and being into adulthood, if you would. And she figures prominently in the story as well.
But Zoltan, isn't that a Hungarian name?
It's actually a Transylvanian name. So he is ultimately from Transylvania, but has come west via Hungary, via Budapest.
I see. Wow. That sounds like a very exciting path. Especially, have you gotten a trip to Vienna out of this trip?
No, I haven't, but I would love to.
Yes, it sounds very real because I happened to visit Vienna and these cafes from 19th century and 20th century, they have such an ambiance.
Right.
Yes, so many lives have been told those stories there. So who is your intended audience?
Folks who enjoy a bit of history. This is period leading up to the First World War, of course, but people at the time, of course, didn't know that. And it's at the change of society from, I'll give you an example. Gustav Klimt is a famous artist.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And if you look at his 19th century art, it's very traditional, portraits and so forth. And then suddenly he turns into the early 20th century and his art just blossoms.
Oh, yes.
Well, that's true across society. Schoenberg in terms of music, literature, all of that was suddenly transformed. And even in the story, one of my characters has an electric coffee pot. That was something brand new, having an electric coffee pot.
Oh my, yes, it was definitely an incredible era of change. And Klimt, I happened to see his exhibit in Vienna. That was quite a. Yes, he brought an incredible change to the portrait.
Exactly.
Just very, let's just say, little on the risque or sexy side of that society.
Right.
Yeah. Oh my. So as a prolific writer, was it difficult to keep this book short?
I wouldn't say it was difficult. As you may remember from my first novel, A Bloodline of Kings, that was 220,000 words. That was huge. This one is a little over 60,000 words. It really is dependent on the characters and the story itself, what it demands in terms of length. So my shortest novella is 20-some thousand words, and The Bloodline is the largest. So you can see it's quite a range.
Yes, in this story, I know you enjoy doing research.
Yes.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about the research and behind the historic.
So I had finished up, was in the process of finishing up a novel called Tampa Bay. And usually as I'm wending my way toward the end of a novel, I've begun researching the next one.
I see. Yeah.
And so I began in June of that year to think about what would be next. And among the various things I came across, I caught a Baedeker guide to Austria from 1903. It's all in German, but nonetheless, that was a part of the inspiration. And a part of it was, I suppose I was thinking about that change in society and the oncoming of the war. And probably when I first started writing, I anticipated writing into that period, into the war. But as often happens when I write, it verved, it swerved, it went a different direction. And the reason it did was Zoltan. He's a character that was predicted to die on a full moon. Wow. And I decided to make use of that. And so the story is simply occurring in 1912.
And yes, and that's a time that people did not anticipate.
Right.
The
it was
Great
still,
War, yeah.
you know, that's the year of the Titanic sinking. That's the year that things change. And the sort of the end of that era, although they didn't know it was the end of the era.
Yes, yes. And that's kind of foreboding.
Right.
Sense to that story. So tell us more about that your source text. Yeah. How did you find this book? Was it just in the antique shop?
There was lots going on in the world at that time. The Ottoman Empire, now we think of it as Turkey, but the Ottoman Empire was coming apart. It was at war with Italy. Montenegro and Bulgaria, Romania, Greece, all piled on in 1912. And so that's an era of beginning of real strong nationalism.
Yes.
There was a great deal of fear about Russia at the time, fear about Germany. And Austria-Hungary was sort of teetering at that stage. It had an extremely elderly emperor. His crown prince was a nephew, anxious to take on the throne.
Wow.
So
you
it's a time of change.
Yes, the palace intrigue.
Right.
And also, I suppose that sense of national identity is emerging.
Oh yes, absolutely. And when the Austrian Empire had been defeated in 1866 by Prussia, that's when Hungary became prominent and became a dual kingdom.
Yes.
So there were literally two governments, a Hungarian government and an Austrian government.
Yeah, what a tumultuous time to be alive. Well, what did you learn about yourself through writing this book?
Well, you know, it's not just this book, but I think what I have discovered is there are some themes that run through the books. One is the prominence of women in my stories.
Yes.
And although I had anticipated Zoltan being the protagonist, in reality, it's Maria Olbricht's story, as a number of my readers have pointed out to me. The other theme is the conservative versus the progressive. And we see that playing out in our society right now. This is always at loggerheads, and it was at that time as well. So I have the proprietor being this very conservative fellow, and people in the cafe are not of that ilk. And so there's that tension as well. Yes. So learning about myself is sort of like understanding where my interests lie in terms of the stories I want to tell. So one is tolerance, another would be the opposite of misogyn, of wanting to promote the idea that the genders are partners, are equal. So those kinds of themes resonate with me.
Yeah, I think those must be difficult themes to address. But I like the setting because a cafe is where people have these conversations and discussions and perhaps even just diversity of thought.
But when diversity of the people itself, right?
Yes.
Exactly.
So, so I see you must enjoy that part of your research.
Oh,
Is
yes.
that the best part of? Do you look at the historically what they would eat and drink and so forth?
Right. Oh, yes, absolutely. In fact, I researched the various pastries of the era, not simply the Austrian pastries, but the Czech pastries, the Italian pastries, and so forth, and had them come. It's the Cafe Adriatic, so the Adriatic, of course, runs between Italy and the Balkans, and so I could bring in all of that.
Well, I think I definitely have to read it now with all that food in there. So how do you plan to market your book? Have you been, are you going to be at the book bin or?
Well, my wife had a booth at the Printers Row Book Fair.
That's right.
Literary Festival.
Last fall.
Yes, and I had hoped the book would arrive in time for that. It arrived a week later. But nonetheless, I've had one book club pick it up, and it was, there's a new bookstore in Highland Park called The Secret World, and it hosted the book club. And so a half a dozen folks who read the novel and I got to discuss the book. I also have had it on my website, and since it first went up, I've had over 500 downloads of that. And then, of course, when I printed it, I used a print house called the Paper House, and they in turn are partnered with Ingram Sparks, who is the distributor. So Ingram put it up on Amazon, put it up on Barnes & Noble, but what was interesting to me, it put it up on sites in Europe, sites elsewhere in the world. So it's attracted some interest across a number of nations.
Well, that was a good choice. I had no idea. You have to tell us more about that. So is this a local print shop, or where is this?
No, the Paper House, I believe they're in, I want to say New Jersey. And I explored a number of different printing options and chose them based partly on price, but more importantly on quality. And I'm really quite pleased with how they turned it out.
Yes. We can.
They've gone on then and also printed my next book. And then Ingram Sparks has the print on demand, so that if you ordered, for example, from Amazon, Amazon doesn't have to carry the stock. They can order it directly from Ingram and send it out to the customers.
I see. That's another step. Okay.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. I'll kind of make sure we make a note of that. Well, speaking of with your next book, it's a mystery. Can you tell us about this, The Consultant in Scratch?
Well, the Consultant is black humor, if you will, in the sense that we have a retired assassin, a hitman, who is out of the blue recruited to do another hit. And he's angry, he's enraged by the fact that someone knows who he is and has retired. And so instead of taking the job, he enlists the purported victim, and together they solve who wants her dead and who is interrupting his retirement.
Oh my goodness, that is a very interesting, the direction to go on a whodunit.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, the unlikely people to find out whodunit.
And Scratch is somewhat similar in the sense that he had a criminal youth, had left that behind for over 30 years, was established, but then someone is knocking on his door. And so he has to go back and find out who it is who's getting him out of hibernation.
I see.
So they're similar thematically.
Oh, this sounds intriguing just as well. And two crime novels, right?
Right, yeah.
So there's two. Yeah, okay, well, so let's go back a little bit on you got 500 downloads. That's a significant.
Yeah, 523 through last week.
Okay, have you gotten some reader response?
Yes, well, in a couple ways. First off, after I had written the novel, I'm a member of a critique group, and the critique members read the novel. They made multiple suggestions, some of them minor and some of them major. And so I rewrote it based on those. So I had those comments. Then I had, as I mentioned, the book club about those kind of comments. If you go on Amazon, you'll see so far 6 people have written reviews.
Oh.
One was extremely negative,
Oh.
rated it 2,
Okay.
said it wasn't worth reading. One rated it 5, walked on water, right? And the other 4 are at 4. So I figure the person who rated it 2, something in the novel touched them to take the time to write a negative review. So even though they didn't like it, something in it grabbed them.
Yes. Yeah, so even that is a sign of you spoke to them, right?
Right,
You spoke
exactly.
to them somewhere.
So writing is supposed to, in a sense, provoke, make you think, etc. Yeah.
Yes. So when you say you rewrote, does this change the version you have that's with the print house?
Well, in a sense, the second version is what I gave Print House. We went through a process, proofreading and their own editing, and some of that I accepted as well. So in a sense, this is the third version.
Well, Tom, this time period, this early 20th century, have you written about this before?
Yes, my second novel, Battle Hymn, covers the period from the Civil War through 1919. It opens on August 1, 1919, which is the tail end of the Chicago race riot. That's where my protagonist is leaving Evanston to collect rent on his houses in the Black Belt. I also took that same character, wrote a sequel called The Voyage of the SS Penetang, set in 1922. I've written a novel, City Life, written in 1925. So that kind of period of transition interests me.
Well, the early 20th century was a huge change in people, cars, right? All
right.
that.
Right. In fact, you can even trace the introduction of the pedal bicycle in the late 19th century meant women couldn't wear the same kind of clothes on a bicycle. Yeah. It actually revolutionized women's wear.
That's true.
All of these things have an impact.
I have read a little bit about that. Yeah, and the skirts had to go up a lot more, and because
no longer having a bustle.
Yes, very highly dangerous to have such long trains, and and changes hats, everything. Right?
Exactly.
So amazing, very incredible. What advice do you have for writers? I know not everyone has the dedication, commitment as you do to writing every day.
You know, in my view, the first requirement of a writer is curiosity. You need to be curious about the world, about what makes people tick, how it impacted your life, how you impact others' lives. And then on top of that, you need the basic skills, which really comes starting with reading. You need to be a reader. And then it starts with practices. I do writing exercises based on prompts that a book I have at home. And so every Wednesday I put up a little exercise. I have a friendly barista at the local cafe that I go to, and I was sharing with him Off-Campus Writers Workshop, which is another avenue. It's an organization that's 80 years old soon, founded in Winnetka, but now is hybrid, and so people from all over the world or all over the country can participate. And so I recommended that he try that out.
Off-Campus Workshop.
Off-Campus Writers Workshop. Right. It was founded by wives of some professors from Northwestern University in 1946.
Wow. So that must help a lot of writers to get started.
Oh, yeah.
And you have a writers group too, don't you?
I've been a member of a critique group which was a fairly close-knit group of about 7 of us over a number of years. More recently, we've organized a beta reader group. So we share each other's novels, read them, get together, give our thoughts, our concerns, our questions about the particular work, and allow someone to then revise.
Yes, and I guess you become good editors as well, right? Because you're writing.
Well, you learn what's effective, and you want to be sure to weigh it, to balance it properly, in the sense that no one person's view of a book you want to accept. You need to see the views from a number of different people before you can say, okay, I see that there's a trend among these folks, these readers. These are things I need to change. These are outliers that maybe I don't need to worry about.
So how about the cover? Have you any input in the cover? Was it your
choice?
Yes.
This cover, the photographs at the top, there was a photographer in Vienna in the early 20th century named Emil Meyer. He wrote did hundreds of photos of street folks. And I came across this photography and chose to make my characters based on some of the photos that he offered. And then the one on the back, which is a waltz going on, that was suggested by the folks at the Paper House. So that seemed to work pretty well too.
That's a nice, gives you the sense and the ambience of that book.
Exactly.
Yes. So what connects you to Glenview?
Well, primarily the library. The library has lots of programs, as you probably know. I enjoy going and participating in various ones. I always like the little contests they have with I think they call them 6x6 artists' work.
Yes.
And always make sure to see that, but also participate in others. And of course, they have a used bookstore. So I'm a patron of the used bookstore there as well.
Where you find the reading that makes you a better writer.
Exactly, right. And then there's some other less direct. I'm a board member for the North Shore Senior Center, and the North Shore Senior Center covers 39 communities all around the area, including Glenview.
That's true.
I'm also a board member of the Winnetka Northfield Public Library, and of course they're part of RAILS, which is a library organization that includes the Glenview Library and other libraries. Yes. So there are other connections.
Yeah, and that must be very fruitful for an author.
Oh yeah.
Yes, all your ideas. A great place to be curious.
Exactly.
So let me see. What would you say to encourage authors out there? Just a short
note. Don't be afraid of a blank page. The blank page is in front of you. Just start writing. If you end up scratching that out, that's okay. It'll be a building block. And you go on and you keep writing until it starts clicking, starts working for you, and you start having sort of a flow of ideas and thoughts that get translated into words. Be balanced in what you do. Not too much detail, not too little detail. Make it real, authentic.
Yes. Well, that is a tough one, too. Not too many details and not too little.
Right.
Right? Because a novel probably has more space or time, the pace for you to fill in the details, but a short story, there's no room for that.
Right. You've got to be a little more direct in a short story. Yeah.
Boy, so I'm impressed with all the different forms of writing you have done. Just not something everyone can master.
Well, I'm not sure that I've mastered them, but I sure have fun doing it.
And essays, right? Essays is a different type of
I've done some essays, some poetry, but I'm really a novelist at heart.
Well, thank you for returning to Glenview TV.
You're most welcome, and thank you for having me.
And thank you for watching. Join us next time on Off the Shelf.